Two operators, one conversation, no fluff. This is the Wealthy Momentum Podcast with Jimmy Nicholas and Dr. Dustin Burleson. AI is not going to replace you. Entrepreneurs using AI are going to replace the ones who do not.
Welcome to the 67th episode, Your Employees Are the Bottleneck. And I wanted to start this episode because I want to soften the title a little bit, because I know we got a lot of team members that join us, and I know my team members love listening to the podcast. And first and foremost, as a founder, you know, we're part of the team and we're employees as well. We're lumped into that category. And myself personally, I've lived through it now twice, where I've been the extreme bottleneck, and it goes about it a lot differently today with AI. And at the end of the day, whether it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, we have to remove the bottlenecks because money loves speed. And when we can remove the bottlenecks, whether it's, you know, the founder, team leaders, people within the organization, that's really when, you know, growth and momentum can really, really start to happen. So I'm super excited to be talking about this topic today. And Dustin, thanks for taking time again and joining us for this great topic.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So, you know, a couple of months ago, we talked about what to keep and what to kill. And last month we talked about that hidden money. And now, you know, we're going to talk about who's actually going to capture that and who's going to serve, you know, the people to give the solutions that you have for the marketplace. And so, Dustin, if you could, you know, just go back to when you were starting out, you know, small office, and, you know, you were putting all these systems in place. We thought we could just hit the easy button with, you know, automation and technology, and, you know, everybody would just be machines. You know, how that has transformed for you back then compared to today, to kind of start us off here.
Yeah, I had this conversation with another coach and consultant in our space, and he was looking at one of the books that I had written, and he's like, "Well, this is written by a 26-year-old." And I said, "Yeah, here's exactly how old I was when I wrote that book." I think when you're young and you have something to prove, whether that's, you know, a lot of guys are trying to prove to their fathers or their family or to naysayers that they're going to be successful. And, you know, Steve Jobs talked about this. You know, a lot of successful people talk about how they wanted to prove other people wrong, and you end up breaking a lot of glass doing that. And I don't know that that's always the smartest way to do it. I can tell you a lot of us have to learn that lesson. And so I was one of those people that learned that lesson, that you can grow things from the bottom up. You don't have to force everything from the top down. There are times when it's urgent. There's times when it's not urgent. There's times when it's important. There's times when it's not important. And I think young entrepreneurs have trouble distinguishing between those kind of four matrices, the Eisenhower matrix of, you know, it's either important or not, it's either urgent or not. And when you're 26 years old trying to prove to the world that you can be a success, everything feels urgent, everything feels important. And I can tell you there's smarter ways to grow businesses that are more sustainable. And also, and when I was 26, that was pre-COVID, pre-pandemic. I was chatting with Jimmy pre-recording. You know, we could throw up an ad on back then it was Craigslist or LinkedIn, or even our very first ads were in the physical newspaper. It tells you how old I am. And we could put 30 people in a recruiting room tomorrow. It was wild how fast and easy it was to find talent. And the world has changed. So a lot of talented people work from home. A lot of talented people got out of the market of what I do in local service providers. But I'll say this, and I do like the Jimmy soft in the title. I've been doing this a long time. And the business owner listening to this is probably not building a software as a service company. They're probably not building the next great social network. I mean, there are systems that are truly engineered systems. When I think about, you know, computer science, when I think about AI, there's things that Jimmy's building that do that. But most of you are running systems that involve people. And as a function of that, you have to become really good at distinguishing what is system performance. What does that actually look like? Because people will hire me and say, I just need you to take a look at our ads. I just need you to take a look at our building. Is it big enough? Does it have enough, service capacity? I need you to look at our market and tell us if we should expand. So they think they've got a marketing problem. They think they've got an advertising problem. They think they've got a sales problem. A lot of them think they have a new customer problem. And in reality, they have a system performance problem. And system performance in our world requires people. And so we're not throwing anyone under the bus. Jimmy's right. As a founder, as an owner operator, you are also an employee. And I love a quote that Jimmy sent to me earlier this week. We're always bouncing ideas off of each other. And the quote Jimmy sent me was from Jim Collins. And Jim Collins is one of the best business minds that ever has walked this earth. And he said, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Now, a lot of us have heard that, and I agree. The second part of that quote is, if someone else can do your job, you're in the wrong chair. And it's so powerful because so many owner-operators sit in every chair. They can't let go of the finance. They can't let go of the advertising. They want to see and hire every new employee. And I worked for a guy that said, Dustin, if I don't change the toilet paper doesn't get changed. I said, you're probably right, because you've trained your team that you wear every hat and that you sit in every chair and nothing happens without you, so they're helpless. So I will say the number one person that needs to look in the mirror when it comes to being a bottleneck is us, because we won't let go. And the minute you start to let go, and to Jim Collins's brilliant point, realize that today, how many things did I do that someone else could do? And when you realize you're holding on to too much, that list is probably longer than it has to be. So I'm not throwing anyone under the bus. We're all going under it, under it together a little bit. And that is, we are all the bottlenecks. Most problems you have in your business are system performance problems. It's inefficiencies that you tolerate. It's the hidden money we talked about in the last episode. It's not knowing what should stay and what should go, that we talked about in the episode before that. So I love this topic, and we were chuckling ahead of time because even though I've changed my level of intensity, shall we say, when it comes to managing employees, they're so critically important in businesses of 99.9% of the people listening to this and for whom we help.
And I'll say, the good news is, because of technology, as an overall arch of data, when I looked at it, it used to take in about 1991, and just to put into perspective, this is like fax machine days and landlines. FedEx was high tech back then. About 2.5 employees. And I always like to say team members, by the way, because I feel that's a better terminology. And my team members are I'm part of the team, their team, our team. So if I say that, obviously employee can fit in there as well. But 2.5 people to generate $1 million. Today, that average number, that blended average, and to your point, Dustin, there's a lot of more SaaS companies and software companies out there, but that's down to 1.5 persons. And if we look at it from a progression in 2005, now early internet, email is, starting to be used, and basic websites, digital is starting to replace the paper. It went to about 2 employees for $1 million. So if about $500,000, and this is adjusted for inflation, so that we're, comparing apples to apples. And, then you went into 2015 and we got more in the cloud computing and mobile devices and social media, and customer relationship management tools really started to come into play, and it bumped up, another about 60,000. We're $560,000 of revenue per employee. So almost to that 2 number. And if you'll notice those gaps, 9 to 25, and then 2005 to 2015. So the years, the gaps are shrinking in those intervals. Now, when we go from the 2015 early AI, it jumps up to almost $650,000 per employee in terms of revenue per employee. And that's obviously you got SaaS and AI entering everywhere. And here we are in 2026, and we've got agentic AI, which, it can be a new term for many of our listeners. And if you think of it, it's almost like an AI army. And years ago, virtual assistants were very big for founders, and then founders realized, well, if I'm using a virtual assistant, other team members should be using a virtual assistant. Like we should give our team members access to Fiverr and give them access to these, freelance websites to get more done in less time. And we're seeing a very similar trend with setting up the team with AI. And so that arc, who knows what that number is going to be. I was astonished when I saw that, NVIDIA today is at about $4.5 million revenue per employee. And it's 129,000 employees doing 130 billion. And it's like, and they're, followed by Netflix, 9,600 employees, very tiny team. They're doing 4.15 million per employee. Apple, 2.38 million per employee. And so this number, leverage 0.1, RPE as the diagnostic, it's very, very simple to do. You take your total revenue and you divide it by your total headcount. And if you are utilizing, offshore labor, virtual assistants, I put those in as headcount. If it's not a W-2 employee, but they're still part of your team, that's headcount. And I remember the exact time when I learned this, and it was at one of our first events that Dustin, you invited me to, was at the Ritz-Carlton and in Orlando. And you were explaining, revenue per employee. And I had never even heard of that stat. And you were like, this is a whole different way to, look at your business in a different lens. And the feeling that I got, I still remember, it was like a pit in my stomach when you were sharing, I believe the average in your world is about 150 to 200,000 per.
Up 185, 250. Yes, it's gone up since that event. Yeah.
And at the time of the event, you were at like 400,000 per team member.
Yeah.
So I looked at my revenue and I looked at my head count and I did the math, and I was at like 37,000 per team member. And I got that pit in my stomach and I was like, wow, what is going on? Why I'm 10x behind. Now I know we're not moving teeth, but we're helping the people move teeth. We should really look at this, and we're the technology company. So what we did as a team is we really looked at how we were doing business and how we were fulfilling. And the team that served us to that point was great. But to get us to another level and, serve our clients more efficiently and more consistently, we decided to really evaluate who was on our team, and we got rid of a lot of dead wood. And it was at the time of implementing core values as well. And it really just, they kind of shed themselves a lot of times too, when you're bringing those core principles into place. And what ended up happening over, say, the next 18 months from that point is we were doing about, 2 million a year, and then we grew to about 3 million. So we did have some revenue growth, but our head count went from 55 people to 24 people. And what that did is that jumped us up to about 100. I think the number was about 125,000 per team member. And so it was a 3x improvement in 18 months. And we were able to do it, in a much better deliverable. And what we did the tactic of it is we had a lot of people offshore listening to calls and also doing a lot of SEO work at the time. And we decided to bring that back, in the United States. And we paid more, but our production went up tenfold. And I think a lot had to do with it because instead of listening to, an 8-minute call to realize this is an existing patient, a team member that's properly trained and understands the culture, they were able to figure that out in 30 seconds. And so this number is really, really important because it's so easy just to think like the answer is to add people. And before you know it, that number, revenue per employee, just gets, lower and lower and lower.
Yeah, I mean, listen, almost everything in the business gets better with higher margin. And this isn't the sine qua non of, business efficiency. This is one proxy you should be chasing. I don't think, every industry is aligned. I think there are outliers, and I know pretty quickly meeting with someone, depending on what industry they're in, what their revenue is based on their number of employees. And they're always mystified that I can pretty closely guess what their annual revenue is based on looking at a team photo. Just count the heads and multiply it by the average revenue per full-time. How did you know that? It's a sign of efficiency. Return on invested capital is important regardless of where you put it. If you park it in a real estate investment trust, if you park it in a 401k, if you park it in fine art and rare jewelry, I don't care where you put the capital, it needs to produce a return. There's this thing called inflation, right? And I'm not a financial advisor. I don't even play one on TV. But if you're in the service industry, your payroll is probably your biggest line item on your profit and loss statement. Payroll is one of your biggest investments. So you have to hold it accountable to produce a return. Otherwise, the money moves for very specific reasons. It goes where it moves. It's attracted to speed. It goes where it can multiply quickly. It goes where it's taken really good care of. This drives a lot of people crazy, but it doesn't move for moral purposes. If that were true, only kindergarten teachers and pastors would be rich. There wouldn't be any rich drug dealers. There wouldn't be any rich people on OnlyFans making 6 figures a month, taking their clothes off in front of a camera. The money moves for reasons that you might or might not like, but it moves for very specific reasons. And one of those is the care with which you hold it accountable to produce a return. So I have an issue with clients who can't get payroll under control and think that every problem is solved by hiring another person. Shane Parrish, who's pretty smart over at Farnham Street, says the opposite. He says every problem in your business wears a hat. It's most problems in the business are you can be assigned to a person who's either being your tolerating underperformance in that department or in that team lead or in that manager, or they're in the wrong seat, but for whatever reason, you've decided they've been here for 30 years and God, it would just break your heart if they had to go. And so that's just not how you run a business. And if you treat every decision that way, there won't be a business and you'll all be out of jobs. So I do take it very seriously. And I think some of the smartest companies in the world do as well. And they don't make rash decisions. These are human beings we're talking about. We're not simply, doing a reduction in force because we want to juice profitability. We're right-sizing companies at specific times so that they can fulfill on their mission and vision to the world. And if you don't do that and you won't be a good steward and fiduciary for the company, then you shouldn't be making those decisions. And I can promise you eventually the company won't be there to live out its mission and vision. So I take it very seriously. It's not the only metric when it comes to system performance, but it's a really good one, is how efficient is your system at turning human capital into profit. And in my world, a really big one is revenue per chair hour. So what's the fastest way to turn chair time as a dentist, orthodontist, doctor into revenue? And a lot of us, these numbers are suffering because of the democratization of everything. The internet has made it very easy to find orthodontic treatment, price it out, have it delivered to you at home. And there's been price erosion. And subsequently, a lot of offices haven't adapted to new ways of doing business, and they're running very high overheads. And it kind of breaks my heart because I know that that is a really hard place to be. And so it's a great metric. It's not the only one, but absolutely a lever point is to go home tonight and figure out what is your revenue per full-time employee. If you've got part-time employees, count them as 0.5, but figure that out and then ask how efficient is your system at turning human capital into EBITDA or profit. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, the late great Charlie Munger, call EBITDA bullshit earnings. I tend to agree, but I think, on some level, the profitability of the business is really, really critical. And there are times to take on debt. We'll get into that in later episodes, but revenue per full-time employee is critically important.
And we do have like benchmarks as well in the resource that goes with this episode. So if you haven't been on momentuminsiders.com yet to, become an insider of the show and get extra resources, we show you, we even built a spreadsheet that you can use on Google Sheet as well as Microsoft Excel to help you calculate this. And it leads into the second lever, which is time allocation and, what you're spending your time on. So we have in that spreadsheet a tab for you basically to, have the items that you're doing on a daily basis and how long you're spending. And, first thing is just, take inventory. And this is something that obviously the founder should do, but also, your team members should do in terms of their time and what tasks could they be done for less. And is there a technology that can do that task, which, is happening more and more today, that we are able to leverage technology and AI to do some of these things. And, I remember doing this, many, many years ago, and I did it not only for the business, but also for myself personally. So, I would look at the time, work time, and then personal time. And, if I was cutting the grass and I could get somebody to cut the grass that's going to do a better job at it than me anyway, and not have to maintain a mower and have to go get gas because the mower ran out and all that stuff, and I could really just do what I do really well and do it for less dollars an hour than I'm earning, then that makes sense, to invest in. And this audit is very helpful when it comes to, should I delegate this? Should I bring somebody in on my team? And I say that bring somebody in. It could be an outsourced vendor. It could be a freelance project that you post on a website to have somebody do. But taking the time and just doing an audit of your time and taking a look at what can be outsourced is a big lever to help remove bottlenecks, because you get more done in less time and for less dollars.
Yeah, I heard Roger Martin, who's the retired dean of business at Toronto's business school. He was on this podcast back when it was the Burleson box. I think twice. We got him on twice. Brilliant. He's got just brilliant books. He's a brilliant business mind. He's kind of today's Peter Drucker, I think, the world of Roger. And he was talking about high performers that he had met. And he said the highest performers are like almost all signal. There's just no noise. Everyone says Steve Jobs was kind of like that. He was just like 99% signal. In other words, everything he was focused on mattered, and it was only in his lane. He wasn't distracted by things that didn't matter. And I think one of the biggest challenges I have in working, when I've worked with, someone asked me recently, like, how big do you have to be to work with you guys? I think that $2 to $3 million in annual revenue is kind of a sweet spot where we can really, put rubber to the road. And it doesn't mean we haven't worked with smaller clients, but we've worked directly with businesses in the $50 to $100 million range, and on light levels and are in the periphery for businesses larger. And so I've hung around with some really smart people. And one of the quickest things I discovered is that true high performers, the average person would be laying on the floor exhausted at the end of the day, clueless how they just did what they did. How did they have that many meetings? How do they make that many decisions? And it's about this signal to noise ratio. The average person is consumed with what's on the news, what's in their social media feed, what the neighbor said about the other neighbor's dog crapping in their yard, and what the weather is going to be. And I'm not saying you can't do some of these things, but the highest performers don't do hardly any of it. It's all signal. It's not noise. And the average person is consumed by noise. His point was profound. And I've seen it in high performers I work with, and what the gap between those two. Someone that says, I'm at 3 million and I want to go to 10, or I'm at 10 and I want to go to 50, is that they think they will get bigger by doing more of what they're already doing. So this ties into Jimmy's point. You can get a little bit bigger doing a little bit more, but to get significantly bigger, you'll have to actually stop doing a whole lot of things. So the HVAC owner operator listening to this says, well, I've got 3 locations, so I want to go to 4, right? You can kind of do this incremental growth for a while. The problem is you think now you're going to run 4 like you ran 3. And there's an immense difference between running 4 like you ran 3 and running 30 like you've never run anything before. And that's the difference, is that the highest performers make that leap and they stop doing a whole bunch of stuff. So this is not just about getting really, really good at making your current day more efficient. That's a good place to start. But it's really about, how many things am I doing that I need to completely stop doing? Like, instead of when I get the phone call that the 4th location now has a power outage, internet failure, and its locusts are descending upon it, but it's 2 hours away, so now I'm in my car and I'm driving to go deal with this. That's not how someone who owns 300 of them thinks. And that's not how they operate. So it's a big list of things you're not going to do anymore. There will definitely be some things new you're going to have to do you've never done before. But the biggest and the hardest thing, the point I want to make is, it's so hard to let go. And I mentioned it in the first lever. I'm saying it again today. So when you allocate and do a task audit, you absolutely start to think about, what can I take away? What can I stop doing? And that's not the inherent mode of behavioral thinking for the average human. We had Leidy Klotz on the show. Leidy did the research on, his book is called Subtract, and how we innately want to add things. So we want to add and add and add and add and add. And the reality is, the best growth, the most efficient systems often come from subtraction, and we don't inherently think about subtracting. So think about what you need to stop doing. It's a great lever. Lever number 2 is fantastic. Really, really powerful.
And we're going to go a little bit deeper into basically looking in the mirror in lever number 3, the founder as the bottleneck. And I'm going to share a story, really what caused me to delegate was, the birth of my son. And, if we go back, I started the business when I was 15 years old, sophomore in high school, selling websites, web hosting company all through college. And, on the web hosting side, my team members were really servers. So it was easy to manage that business. And then I had a team that I outsourced all the support to. So I really didn't have, much to do people wise. And then as I had more time and realized the importance of marketing and getting people to the website, and then once they get there, how do we turn that into, actual dollars in the bank account and not just clicks? I realized quickly I needed a team to do that. And so what ended up happening is for years, we were a generalist agency trying to help everyone. And I don't want to say we weren't helping no one, but we certainly weren't helping people at the level that we could had we specialized. Now, keep in mind, that is back then when we did not have AI and the ability to take frameworks and quickly adapt in any industry. So at that point, when we started to specialize, it was because of our relationship, Dustin. You brought us in. There was previous vendors that, tried to implement and get the websites launched for your people and marketing systems. And, it, for whatever reason, it didn't work out, and we were there, and we quickly went from about $500,000 in revenue to 1.1 million in revenue in like a couple months, like bang. And that growth, you could imagine going from a small person team to like, oh my God, we really got to get these sites out because, we can't upset Dustin's people. We want more of Dustin's people. And I related it to, some people have heard of like the Oprah effect. I called it the Dustin effect. And I was certainly the bottleneck there, and, obviously brought people in, and then, it came to a point where we had about 20 accounts, and I was the account manager for each and every one. And like, this thing was my baby. And I remember, when my wife were going to the doctor's appointments leading up to, during her pregnancy, and she's like, you realize like you're not gonna be able to work like you did, you've done for years. And I'm like, of course, yeah, I know that, of course. And it was like, oh boy, who's gonna serve these people? And as it turned out, as I was forced to delegate and really empower my team and trust my team and obviously check in with them, and very quickly I realized, wow, they're doing a better job than I could have done. And a lot of it has to do with, they're not running 1,000 things through their mind at a given time. As the founder, typically we're wearing 1,000 hats, and, they're able to really focus and serve. And so that forced delegation, it took me about 20 years to let go of that. And, here we are again in, building this, call it second agency, where, we're not just helping on the marketing side, but more on the operational side and AI implementation side. And lo and behold, I'm the bottleneck again. And it's now, though, not going to take 20 years to realize that we have to delegate it. It takes, no time. And the big difference that I have today that I didn't have back then is the use of AI. And so to be able to put plans together and be confident in decisions in that delegation, we didn't have that years ago. I mean, we went to conferences, and I still go to conferences. You just got back from one a couple weeks ago, but what we have available really allows us to empower our team with better information, make better decisions, and help the founder remove themselves as a bottleneck with more confidence than I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, delegation is the number one of the highest ranking skills of the highest performing CEOs and leaders is their ability to delegate. So I think a quick thing you can go home and do, we're trying to give you levers. You go, oh yeah, I'm going to pull that one, is you could go into your business tomorrow and ask your team. You could do it tonight. You could do an anonymous survey to all your employees. I think this one should be personalized. If you use the Colby and you use kind of this mode of operandus that every employee has, you just ask them a simple question. What are you not doing that you would love to do if I would just get out of your way? What are we not letting you do? You would love to do it if we just get out of the way. And you're going to find someone who goes, I saw that webinar with you and Jimmy, and I love like marketing and advertising. You know, my aunt, she was in advertising. I'd like to help with that. You know, like you have no idea that someone who's in a totally different department wants to help. So ask them, what are you not doing that you'd love to do if I get out of your way? Now, here's the cool thing. Years ago, you had to sit down with all those answers. At our peak, I think we had 52 employees. I think Jimmy had more than that. We've got clients that have hundreds. And you had to go through and really critically think about how and when and where you could plug someone in. With the intelligence machine that Jimmy has built, and it's got everyone's Colby's in it, and all the best HR practices and all the best management and strategic thinking practices, my stuff, some of the best business minds in the world, 10 times smarter than me. We've built it all out, and then we've also done what's worked with our clients. And I've had my eyes on. We had one yesterday. I said, I agree with 99.999% of this, except for this one line right here. Let's go fact check that. And now the intelligence machine gets smarter. And that's so powerful, to Jimmy's point, to do it quickly and thoroughly. And we're going to talk about the right way to do this with HIPAA protection and data privacy, because most AI is not safe for you to be playing around with as a healthcare provider in my world, but probably any business provider if you're not doing it the right way. So please take data and customer privacy very seriously. There was a huge lawsuit recently with a huge dental group. They had a Facebook tracking pixel on a page that was allowing patient protected health information to be exposed. It was significant, multi 7-figure lawsuit against a huge dental chain, and very recent. And so that's sufficiently terrifying to know that if you're going to do AI, do it the right way, do it with Jimmy. But I am just so excited for someone who says, all right, I asked my team and I got a bunch of answers, and I plugged those into the intelligence machine that you'll have access to. You'll have your own little machine. You can just plug that in, and out comes a report of incredible depth, not just, a few paragraphs of go do this. It's got, up to a 12-month framework of how you're going to do this, how you're going to monitor it. How will you know if it's successful? What are the conversations you could have at 30-day, 90-day, 180 days? And then how will you improve it? It's so wild how fast you can do things like this, where years ago it would take months. It's really, really exciting.
And the next one is systems and AI integration. So leverage point number 4, systems and AI integration. And, as I was hearing you say, have Jimmy do it the right way, I want to preface that where, this is all new. And what we are doing, as I shared on a previous episode, I used to have people go and research and then come to me with a decision as to, hey, this is the one we should be going with, or this is the way we should be doing it. And today we have the ability to, in a matter of really seconds, minutes, have a workforce, call it agentic AI, multiple agents go and search hundreds of websites and go into the forums of Reddit, and people that are having real experiences look at the dates and really provide feedback as to how to go about it. And it ties into this leverage point 4, because sometimes our clients are like, I want to move faster. Now keep in mind, I'm a 9 quick start. You mentioned the Colby, Dustin. For those of you who haven't heard of the Colby, it's the tool that really helps you understand how you're wired and helps your people understand how they're wired. So where your natural energy flow is. It comes apparent with mine that, doing financial bookkeeping is not my specialty in terms of it doesn't get me excited, but doing these podcasts and talking to a client and figuring out, how we're going to maximize an opportunity or, mitigate a challenge, that gets me excited. That's what I'm naturally wired to do. And what we done is we've realized that not everything should be implemented right away, especially in this new world of AI, because yes, I would love to say Jimmy's way is the right way. Obviously, we're doing everything we can to make it make sense. And, I wrote an email last night to a client, and he's very eager to get his website up. Now he has a website, and the website is not to the standard of what is acceptable today in terms of not only Google, but also these answer engines. It's almost like the website doesn't exist to the answer engine. And, had I built the site 2 months ago, and, we go back to that first agency, I would operate on instinct and then have data and research prove that, my instinct was right. Like I would get that later. That's typical 9, quick start in the COVID world. Today, though, because of what we have and because it's new, just like I tell, all of our team members, you got to look at this like what we do for our clients as if it's your money. And I did not feel comfortable, spending money on, or my clients' money, my money, on launching a site that I had a feeling would have to be redone in a month, and needed more time to really understand what underlying factors we believe are what these answer engines want to see, and get it from a logical standpoint. And so that evaluation period, it can actually save you money. You're still operating, you're still getting, patients in. And sometimes, especially in a new world, and many of us want to be pioneers, and, that is all well and good. But when it comes to healthcare, and I would say, like, to your point, Dustin, any industry, whether you're held to HIPAA standards or not, wouldn't you want to keep your customers' data protected? And wouldn't you want to have the peace of mind knowing that you've closed as many holes as possible for, a data breach, or, being taken over by ransomware, or, any of these types of things, and having, training in place to mitigate these types of things. And so I share all that because systems and AI integration, yes, it can definitely be a lever to pull, but oftentimes we really have to investigate it. And it's alarming. The more I learn, the more I see commonplace practices being very, I would say, not, come out and say it, not HIPAA compliant, not favorable for data protection. And, it's really ensuring, I mean, I was about to, implement something for clients that I implemented myself first. Always like to, test it ourselves. And it was a little bit of a gray area with one of the major vendors. And as I investigated more and more, it was like, yeah, there's actually another way to do this. And so sometimes it's better to, just put the brakes on a little bit, and get that confidence, look at some case studies of others, see experiences of others. And then obviously, if it's something that makes sense to bring a system in and integrate, then do it. And I want to add one more story before I give you a chance on this one, Dustin. And that is like the insurance verification piece, which is a big, big problem for a lot of healthcare providers, because they're finding their team having to sit on hold for extended periods of time majority of the insurance verification stuff, and is this covered, that there's software for that built into your practice management system in most cases. It's the ones that aren't built into that and they're not willing to share into the feed. And, you know, there are companies out there that have built robots, and basically the robot will call up and it will wait on hold. It'll type in, press 2 for this, 3 for that. And it'll be much more kinder than I am in terms of not saying, I get me a human on the phone. It will, go to the script. And then when it comes time to actually talking to somebody, that human on the other end of the company you're trying to get information from is going to choose to talk to your AI person or not. And it sounds all well and good when you hear it from the marketing standpoint of the companies that are pushing this system or systems like it. When you look at it though, and you look at the cost of what it costs currently, per minute to have that AI agent sit on hold versus, obviously have a human on hold, logically you would say to yourself, well, the AI agent's got to be, a lot less expensive. However, a human while on hold can do another task. And so we really have to look at, what would make the most sense. And then oftentimes the AI agent can't fulfill on what it was that they called to get in the first place. Company hangs up on them, doesn't have the right information. And this is something that, if we went down this path and didn't really look at the research and the data and the case studies, you've implemented a system now in your practice and you realize, we should go back doing it the old way. However, we're going to be testing this with a handful of clients, a different way of going about it. So instead of having the person that is greeting your patients coming in the door, waiting on hold with their, phone or headset on and telling people, oh, wait a minute, I've been waiting on hold for 30 minutes. I'm going to say hello to you, as soon as I'm done with this. Instead of doing that, getting somebody outside of the office that can be tied into your system and making those calls. And instead of them, doing nothing on hold, because, the AI agents, in order for them to be really effective, they can only do one thing. They have to be really, really specific. So the human that can do other things and, start texting some unconverted leads or some people who have not rescheduled their consultation or, coming up and doing some revenue producing activities while that person's on hold, and then being able to get that answer in 30 seconds, 60 seconds, that could be a much more effective way than just going, direct to AI. And I share all that because not everything at this point deserves to be outsourced. But if it's a simple task and it's done, 50 times a day, 50 times a week, 50 times a month, and it can be outsourced or automated and leveraged AI to do that, it's a great lever, to pull to remove a bottleneck.
Yeah, no, I think Jimmy's way of doing it is always evolving. It's always new, and it's not simply, this is our system and we haven't thought it through entirely. I think I just see a lot of vendors right now who have AI systems for service providers that are not entirely secure. There's so many tools. There will be more by the time we're done with this show. There are so many tools. You can be as aggressive as you want to be. You can also do it securely. Those two objectives don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can be aggressive and you can be HIPAA compliant in my world. You can be aggressive and you can protect your customers' data. You don't have to just try everything that comes your way. It's almost never a good strategy, but it will land you in some potential privacy issues in the healthcare space. I can promise you there are tools right now being used in healthcare practices that should not be used. And Jimmy has gone to great lengths and spent many tens of thousands of dollars on certification and making sure that everything we've built is absolutely secure and HIPAA compliant. It's really powerful.
And I would take it a step further. SOC 2 compliant is even just another whole layer of security. And we're in the process of that because it takes, you actually have to have it in place for months and have daily audits and, before you get that actual attestation at the time of this recording. So in terms of some quick tactics for the HIPAA compliance piece, if you haven't gotten a business associate agreement from that software company, it's a HIPAA violation. So most of the software that you're using, you're not getting that. And so the one that is the easiest, I'll tell you, is Gemini right now with a standard Google Workspace account, $8 to $10 a month and above. You can go into security, check a box off, download the business associate agreement, and now you're not sharing data, and it's private and secure, and you're HIPAA compliant. So in terms of what you can do and what you should do is head over to momentuminsiders.com if you have not already, and get the resources for this episode so that you can go through the 4 levers and remove yourself as the bottleneck, remove your team members, as the bottleneck, and be more efficient. And it helps provide a better experience for your patients, for your clients. And so to review, the first lever point was the revenue per employee, taking that revenue, dividing it by headcount, getting aware of that metric and thinking, what could we do differently to get that to be a better number? The time allocation and task audit for lever 2, and what can we delegate? And then obviously lever 3, the founder, what bottlenecks exist there? What can be delegated? And I can assure you, over time, your team will do that task better than you. And that is a really empowering feeling. And before I get to close this out, lever point number 4, the systems and AI integration. And so when I talk about that empowering feeling, and to bring this full circle for you, getting that clarity, getting that alignment, and building that momentum ends up producing wealth. And when I say wealth, I don't mean like a big fat bank account, although it can do that, but really where you feel great waking up in the morning knowing, your team's got everyone covered, your patients are happy, your clients are happy, you're happy. And it wasn't until really going through this journey of removing bottlenecks and empowering people to get that true feeling of wealth. And so, I empower all of you to really look at your numbers on, that we're talking about here on this episode, and just come with it a different lens. What can be improved? What could be done differently? And get you to a point where you got that better feeling of wealth, and it's always can be improved.
Absolutely. This was a lot of fun. I think it was a cool trilogy. I know that we're going to get into a really important topic next month, but we just gave you a really good framework. I think you should go back through all 3, talk about what needs to go, what should stay, find the inefficiencies, and then identify how the team can improve performance. Next month is going to be exciting. We're going to talk about what is your business actually worth. Most people don't want to talk about this, question. They get nervous talking about this question. They don't know how to calculate it. Their accountant says one thing. Their buddy who sold their business recently says another thing. But everything we've covered here in the last 3 episodes will lead into this. The team leverage, the hidden money, the inefficiencies, your core, all of it feeds into one calculation. And so we're going to answer the question next month. What is your business actually worth? It'll be super exciting, and we will run that number together.
Awesome. See you next month.
Clarity creates alignment. Alignment builds momentum. Momentum produces wealth. Get additional resources, scorecards, and frameworks at MomentumInsiders.com. New episodes the first Friday of every month.